Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Clinton Smith, style editor at Atlanta Homes and Lifestyles magazine, and I'm thrilled to be joined by entertaining expert Keith Robinson. Today, we're going to be talking about the new art of entertaining, especially as we move into the holidays. Even as our gatherings this month will most likely be on a much smaller scale, Keith has some amazing tips on how to elevate the everyday and celebrate in a safe way without sacrificing high style. Before we get started, I want to thank today's webinar sponsor, Signature Kitchen Suite Appliance. Signature's washer dryer laundry is featured at the Atlanta Homes and Lifestyles Home for the Holidays show house. This is the final weekend. Please go and see it. You don't want to miss the amazing roster of talent. Both of these, Signature's full kitchen line was featured in the most recent Casher show house and also at the Serenby show house. Both of these houses will be featured editorially in Atlanta Homes and Lifestyle's upcoming January 2021 issue. It's already 2021. And you'll be able to see photographs of Signature products installed in their beautiful spaces. In the meantime, you can check out Signature Kitchen Suite Appliances at Ferguson, Guy Gunter, North Point Appliance, and Howard Payne in Metro Atlanta. Thanks again to Signature Kitchen Suite. So let's get started. So many of you know my guest, Keith Robinson, for the inspiring events he created over the years through his company, Gloriosa. From charity soirees and major banquets to intimate at-home gatherings. His eye for detail is unmatched in creating glorious experiences, both big and small. These days, he has an exciting new initiative, Red Wine Sessions, which I wrote about in the current December issue, and which we'll be talking about today. I've had the great fortune to collaborate with Keith on many, many entertaining cooking and flower arranging stories over the years, some of which we'll see here, where I've been able to experience firsthand his creative process in making memorable moments in elegant ways without any intimidation factor. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you, Clint.
So Keith, where am I finding you this morning?
Wow, you're finding me in the dining room here at my home, which is known as Red Wine Plantation. I've been here for 12 years now, and I have never regretted for one moment deciding to make the move from my urban loft in Atlanta to my farmhouse in the country.
And so I know it's a 19th century farmhouse, which I've had the pleasure to visit many times. And you're about, what, half an hour south of Atlanta?
Yeah, it's actually about 40 minutes south of Atlanta, about 20 minutes from the Atlanta airport.
Fantastic. So today we're talking about, the art of hospitality in these unusual times and really how to elevate everyday living. And one of the things that you have now started at your farmhouse are these amazing workshops called Red Wine Sessions. And I know they actually started about a year ago, but with the shutdown earlier this year, you've pivoted and they've sort of taken on a new meaning. Can you kind of tell us about how they started and how they've adapted?
Absolutely. Well, since moving to the country, have developed about 5 acres of gardens around this house. There are also 2 outbuildings, one of which was converted to outdoor living and entertaining space. And about a year ago, a little over a year ago, I started teaching classes to mostly people that live in the area, in and around Chattahoochee Hills, where I was teaching folks the basics of gardening, the basics of floral arranging, how to do container gardens. We've talked about incorporating vegetables into your flower beds, etc. During the holidays, of course, we launched into holiday decoration, building garlands, wreaths, forcing bulbs, and all manners of things that we do around the holidays. And as those classes progressed and gained a lot more notoriety in the area and also on social media, the shutdown occurred. Well, we took a hiatus for about a month and a half, and in being in and around the environs of Chattahoochee Hills, I would run into some of my previous students from time to time. And one day I put the window down in my vehicle, and one of them, in a very socially distanced voice, said, "When are you going to start teaching classes again?" And I said, "Well, everybody's isolating right now." And the student said, "Well, if the ladies who all have been isolating feel safe coming to your pavilion and being in your garden, would you consider starting again?" And so we started again, and they came back bigger and better than ever before. So I'm grateful, absolutely grateful.
That's fantastic. It's such a great service. And we're looking right now at an image that we collaborated on years ago, but I think it truly speaks to a lot of the things that you touch on in your classes, right? It's still just as applicable now as it was then.
Absolutely. One of the things that we touched on in one of the previous sessions was elevating the art of at-home entertaining, where we sort of took a deep dive into how you can elevate the everyday and make it more and more fabulous. People were living on top of each other, basically, not really leaving their home except for essentials. And everyone tended to have a bubble of folks that they felt comfortable with. And so to be able to entertain and entertain in a different way with smaller, more intimate groups of people became sort of the way to go. And at the time that we did that class, it was still during the summer. And so in an effort to be completely safe, entertaining out of doors became the way to go.
Right.
We talked about the fact that you don't have to have a spectacular garden, that you
Right.
can just put a table out on your back patio, bring the indoors out of doors, and create a setting that's magical.
Well, one of the things that I've always loved about your work is this idea of farm to table living. It's always been a part of your ethos, and of course now it's so popular. But even if you don't have a farm, I love how you encourage people to do little things and not feel intimidated by it. And I think these two images are a great example, especially the one on the right. You've got this beautiful arrangement of fresh cut dahlias. I think there's even like parts of a tomato plant, a tomato stem in there, and of course these fig leaves, and even the pickled, I'm not even sure what the pickled condiments are, but the pickled and canned vegetables become part of this beautiful tableau.
Absolutely. I have always been one to forage. And I think that when you're entertaining, especially outdoors, to incorporate those elements around you from the garden really make a tremendous impact in sort of making people feel as though they are completely enveloped within the style and essence of your garden. You mentioned those pickled items. We've got some pickled wax beans back there, as well as some chow chow that I made from the green tomatoes. So there's a sort of a synchronicity within the images with the things that have been chosen, almost curated to have all of the elements go together, from the china, the color palette that's in the china, mixing with the floral, as well as the fact that we're eating fig tarts. We've got freshly picked figs, and then of course the fig foliage within the floral. So it creates this beautiful, comprehensive look at creating a tableau.
Well, I'm in California for just a few days, and you already have me missing some Southern home cooking. So, and it's not even breakfast time here. One of the other things I love here is this idea of the continuation of a theme in subtle ways. And I love how you've extended, how you have those beautiful fig branches in the picture, but also this beautiful fig tart.
Yeah, it was a very abundant fig year that year. And I think that simplicity is really, really powerful and beautiful. And I think that there's nothing more beautiful than freshly picked produce piled in a bowl or on a platter. And, you know, of course, not only is it beautiful, but it also adds to your menu. Um, you know, we also notice in this image and the images that you've just put up, how we are in the height of the summer season within this tableau. And we've even chosen some green tomatoes to incorporate into this theme because, once again, they meld beautifully with the color palette of the china.
And one of the things that I love about this, and I think would be applicable to the holiday season is, you know, I know for this story, we had the luxury of working with this beautiful Hermes china and Saint Louis crystal, but I love the mix of the high and low, how you've contrasted that with this very simple, sort of rough hewn, textured table runner.
I love texture. And I think that one of the things most certainly that is my signature is the use of high and low. You're absolutely correct that in creating a more rustic or more textured base, that it allows this magnificent china and crystal to really sing. And even the juxtaposition of the high, the very high, with the lowly raffia table runner, as well as this old farm table, creates such a beautiful juxtaposition that for me, it's sublime. And I love that, that mixture of high and low. And quite often you can get that by using texture. You know, I believe in creating experiences. It's not just about the meal, it's
Right.
about the entire experience and the way that you feel.
Well, this also, I think, this juxtaposition also keeps all of it from feeling too precious or too standoffish, you know?
Absolutely. You know, I myself collect antique china, and we use it every day. And as you know, Clinton, in some of the things that we've collaborated with in the past, I love mixing all of that old Paris porcelain out in the garden with things that are more rustic and sort of creating that juxtaposition again.
Well, I think this next image is a great example of using what you have and turning it into something special. I mean, these are just fresh off the vine tomatoes, and putting them in this, just in a simple pedestal, literally elevates them both aesthetically and turns something sort of simple into really something sublime. And it's really a simple gesture.
I love that. And I also love happy accidents. You know,
Mhm.
I don't know that on the day that we actually did this shoot, that I really knew that this shot was going to happen. It just happened to be a really glorious tomato harvest. And the colors of these tomatoes, there's, I believe, a German striped tomato. There's one that's called Lemon Boy, as well as the small green tomatoes, sort of, once again, came together in a way that it all blended beautifully with the palette that we were using on this day. And so, as you said, to take these very simple elements, elevate them, put them in something that's really wonderful, sort of gives you that feeling of abundance and leans into the sublime. Absolutely.
So ready or not, here we are. It's the festive season. It doesn't quite feel like the 1st of December, but this next gathering is also from a past photo shoot when we could really gather in large groups. But I think I think there are still takeaways here that apply to the times we're in. I love the mix of the chair and the bench seating, which creates this real communal aspect. Um, and I think a big takeaway for me personally is that, people are so often intimidated about entertaining and they don't know where to start. But here you used one color in mass, that brilliant, I don't know if it's a garnet red, cranberry red, that really just sort of takes the guesswork out and really gives you a theme on which to sort of build upon. And whether it's classic or traditional, you don't have to worry about a color scheme and mixing and matching. Um, and I just think that this is a brilliant example of that.
Well, thank you, Clinton. At Christmas time or during the holiday season, um, is really one of the only times that I very generously and liberally use the color red. And it wasn't a difficult choice in this instance, because once again, we were fortunate enough to use this beautiful Hermes china and this San Luis crystal, those red goblets there. And so it was a natural choice to go with red floral in order to punctuate that holiday look and feel. Um, During the holidays, for me, if I'm going to use red, I want it to be the tour de force in what you're seeing. And I want it to just sing red. And of course, there's nothing that mixes more seamlessly with red during the holiday season than, an abundance of texture in evergreen foliage.
Right.
And we've chosen many different foliages for this particular vignette in order to sort of create a balance and a variation in shadow and light within those evergreen foliages. And so red, again, during the holiday season, can really be that tour de force, especially if you use it in abundance.
And this next picture really illustrates that, everything does not have to be like an overflowing cascade of flowers, a big mix. Again, you go either working with a florist or go to the grocery store and you don't even have a starting point. And I love the architectural simplicity of this.
I do as well, and I think that during the holiday season, when is when we typically see amaryllis, and they are so beautiful, and we want to celebrate them. And amaryllis are one of those flowers that, in my mind, are a standalone, and using them in an architectural way, as you said, emphasizes the dramatic look of and the richness of the flower, and used in repetition like soldiers here, just really, really pushes that forward. I believe I used an iron trough in the creation of this vessel, and it's something that one could really easily recreate at home. I'm sure that everyone has got something, whether it's an old toolbox or a small basin, maybe something in blue and white, etc., that one could simply go to the grocery store, find those amaryllis plants, and cut a few stems from your yard to act as supports for them, and you can replicate this look yourselves.
So I love planting amaryllis. Or are we too late to have them in time for Christmas now? Or are we sort of looking at maybe a New Year's bloom if we pot them now?
Well, I think that some particular varieties are absolutely going to bloom for you by Christmas, especially if they're already sending up a flower bud.
Right.
If you put them in the right place in your home, a little bit warm, keep them watered, they should bloom for you by Christmas.
Okay, good. So again, this is an amazing example of how you mix the humble with the fine. This juxtaposition of the fine china and that rough hewn, looks like a fallen tree limb. And again, what I think is really unexpected are these roses, which is something you don't think about for Christmas, but I love here. There's really none of the kind of sentimentality that's associated with Valentine's Day. It's like a completely different experience. And of course, in a pinch, every grocery store has red roses almost all the time. It's just what you do with them. Um, can you just share a little bit how this came about?
Absolutely. And in this instance, it really was more about the color story than it was about the flower. And I knew that I wanted to find a shade of red that most closely matched the color of the red amaryllis, because I'm incorporating both of those flower choices into this scheme. And you mentioned the rough hewn. This is actually the bark on a tree which had come down here on my property some years ago. And over time, the heat of the summer dried the bark and it pulled away from the tree trunk. And so it peeled off in large sheets. And I was able to sort of recreate that tree trunk directly on the table surface, leaving space enough to tuck a vessel with water and plug in those flowers along the way. The use of red, as you said, and specifically the choice of the red roses, not only because of their shade of red, but also because of the richness and the opulence. And once again, we're looking at that high-low idea, and they almost read like velvet in this scheme on a simple wooden table that is covered with I believe it was literally a canvas table runner. So again, you had that mix of high-low, this beautiful china and crystal and flatware juxtaposed against the rustic nature of not only the space, but also the elements used within the table vignette.
And then on the right, we have this beautiful sort of architectural wreath, which I think sort of mimics the architectural arrangement of the amaryllis. Tell us a little bit about all the mix of foliage that you have incorporated in those crimson seed heads.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I really like untraditional shapes in creating holiday decoration. And I chose a square because this particular wreath was suspended over a fireplace, which was a perfect square box. And so it sort of architecturally mimicked that element in and of itself. The evergreen materials, we've got a short leaf pine. There is also foliage, which holds really, really well in the cold. And I also incorporated those seed heads, which is the native sumac that you see on the side of the road often. And I mentioned I do a lot of foraging. And so during the fall and winter, these seed heads are very obvious on the side of the road, especially once all of the leaves have fallen. And they are the perfect shade of red, almost looking like velvet, once again, to bring in that little pop of red on the corners of this wreath. Natural cones, once again, which were collected from my property, as well as some from the short needle pine. The combination of the foliages, some of which appear to be a bit softer, again, is really dynamic for me. And I always like to incorporate, as I said earlier, a multitude of evergreen foliages rather than just using one thing.
Right. So let's talk about food and drink for a moment. So I know right now a lot of us are going to be gathering in smaller groups. And earlier, we've been looking at some more communal gatherings. But either way, like when you're planning a party or big dinner party, small, what is your initial idea of what to serve, whether it's going to be a buffet or something that's seated, or, would you be passing hors d'oeuvres? What is that initial spark for you to kind of decide what to do and where to begin?
Well, in these days and times where we are gathering in much, much smaller numbers, I think that any of those ways of entertaining can certainly be applicable. Whether you're inviting folks within your bubble over for a drink, that you want to serve some small bites that might suffice for dinner. One could go that direction. If you wanted to spend a bit more time with those folks that are in your bubble, then you may opt to do something that feels a bit more formal, a coursed meal where you are serving plated food. And so I think that it really depends upon how much time you have to prep, and what you have in your larder that is available for use. I love sometimes, after a really long day of being out in the garden, to actually come in and take the time to prepare a really, really special meal just for two, for me and my husband. And I think that it doesn't have to be, a bunch of folks coming over to eat,
Right.
to spend the time to do something memorable and something wonderful. And it's the same holds true for the holidays. We just came off of Thanksgiving, where a lot of people were having to rethink the way that they enjoyed that particular holiday, opting not to travel, being with just the folks in your household or someone in your bubble who you may not traditionally spend that holiday with. But
Right.
a lot of entertaining these days is causing us to sort of rethink the way that we go about doing it. And the same holds true in menu planning.
So one of the things this time of year, you have the luxury of being able to forage your property, your farm, but also your natural surroundings, which are very bucolic. And we have some great examples of several wreaths that you've created. And I'd love for you just sort of walk us through them. I was surprised by the one on the left. I thought it was a mix of boxwood or privet with some sort of holly, but in fact, the entire thing is made up of holly. Is that right?
That's right, Clint. It is a small leafed holly that grows in some of the hedgerows around here in Chattahoochee Hills. And dependent upon the summer months and the weather that we have, sometimes we have heavy fruiting years on the holly and sometimes not. In this particular year, it was a very heavy fruiting year. And so the way that the berries grow on this particular holly is all the way up the branch. And so it gave us an opportunity to forage in a way and create this wreath such that it had a looser feel, which, so often when you're building a wreath, it ends up looking very, very tight and very, very
Right.
structured.
Right.
And I like the looseness of this foliage in the way that it came together in the creation of this wreath. And that might be why it's a bit difficult to tell exactly what it is. But even if you'll notice the bare pieces of branch that appear within the context of the composition, which add to the overall look of the wreath. So
And do you
I love this wreath and
and do
love
you
the foliage.
and do you start with a traditional wire frame that you would pick up at any sort of craft store, or what is your basis for attaching the branches?
Well, I realize that not everyone has the time really to build something from scratch, but more often than not, I will build my frames myself. And this particular wreath was made using a wire coat hanger as a frame, because once you stretch that wire coat hanger into a circle, you've got an automatic hook on the back to hang it with. And I wrap that in damp newspaper and then cover that in some sheet moss that I get from a craft store, wrap that with wire, and I've got my base. And so more often than not, that's how I build all of my wreaths. If you don't have access to some of those things, then at your craft store, they do sell just a wire wreath form, which you can attach your foliages to. I find that I get a fuller look, however, if I start with that base, and just that damp newspaper and that moss provides just a little bit of moisture to this foliage and helps it to last a little bit longer.
Keith, I'm always impressed by what you do, but I am really impressed that you created a frame out of a hanger.
Yes, I mean, I've been doing that for a long time.
I love it. So next time we're going to have to see a step-by-step video. So when I saw the arrangement that you created on the right, I didn't even know what it was, but I was just sort of blown away by it. But what I loved about it, it sort of said to me that, you know, you don't have to have a traditional wreath on the door or garland swagging over the door. Tell us about this arrangement.
Sure. Well, when I decorate for the holidays here at Red Wine Plantation, I like to change it up every year. So I've got a beautiful 140-year-old magnolia tree on this property. And 2 years prior to my making this wreath, I actually made a beautiful magnolia wreath, which was green and lovely and lush for that particular Christmas. When I took them down, I put them in the barn where it was dry and forgot about them. And the following year, discovered them again, and they had dried beautifully in this beautiful shade of caramel. And I said, that's really lovely. I'm going to start there. And so this particular idea came, or was inspired, from starting with that wreath as a base and then creating a jabot below, incorporating some fresh magnolia, some cedar here on the property, some large cones, and some other things that I had on hand, and sort of created this look, which has a bit more of a rural feel, which was appropriate for this 1841 house.
And I love the sort of the tartan plaid bow, and then those South Carolina seagrass or sawgrass baskets. It's just such a great touch.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, just using some things that I had on hand, even the drapery tie back, which you see the pom-poms up there, that was an added touch, sort of at the last minute.
And then also when I saw this, I was kind of blown away because I've never seen anything like it. And it's just so unexpected. But at the same time, it's so elegant while using very, very humble materials. And I never would have identified what they were.
This was another happy accident. Of course, always keeping my eyes open for new materials. I thought, why not take a look at these seed heads from a crepe myrtle tree? So what you're seeing there is in the brown are the seed heads from crepe myrtles. I've got 150-year-old crepe myrtles here on this property that produce an abundance of flowers. And so I end up with a lot of these seed heads. And granted, this was a lot in the creation of this wreath, but I think that you would agree that it's pretty dynamic when used in mass. I filled in some of the gaps with some smaller cones, and then chose the Nandina berries for that pop of red, sort of an orangey red, just to create a little bit of difference in texture and also that pop of color.
Well, in our next slide, we're going to see an arrangement you created using faux materials. And I know you're not opposed to that. But what I think is interesting with these other natural creations, you know, right now there's a huge trend on spray painting, a lot of natural elements for wreaths and garlands and glittering and all of that sort of thing. But I know you really, when using natural materials, as far as I know, you sort of don't like a lot of other adornment, right?
Yes, Clint, you're absolutely right. You know, I am not a fan of glitter. I have used spray paint. Uh, Actually, more often than you might think. But you know, I really love the integrity of natural materials, and I think that when you search and you think a little bit outside the box, that you can come up with a combination of things in their natural state that can be just as dynamic, or more so than when things are spray painted or glitzed up. You know, of course, all of that has its place,
Sure.
but I prefer a more treating the product with more integrity. So.
Right. And then back at Red Wine, I love this display of desserts. You've brought the outside in, you've put them all on beautiful pedestals and have used your garden cloches as the covers, which is elegant with a beautiful satin ribbon. And then on the right, we have this moment um, with the faux grapes, which I just think it's unusual but elegant. And just walk us through this a little bit.
Certainly, certainly. So the image there that Clinton, that you mentioned, is the mantelpiece right behind me here in the dining room. And this room it feels sort of opulent when you're in here, because it's where I keep all of my collections of china on display. And so you have a lot of that, as well as the soft fabrics of the table coverings, some antique fabrics, some antique paintings, etc. And so in creating a holiday look for this room, in which I typically only dress the mantle, I wanted to almost do a monochromatic scheme. And these gold candelabra, or these brass candelabra, always live on the mantle. And so incorporating that as the only color story became the first thought in my mind. We mentioned previously about the use of spray paint. And in this instance, I think it's been used to great effect. Many years ago, I happened upon these magnificent clusters of dark grapes, which are made of plastic. And just with a dusting of matte gold spray paint, it really changed them into something really quite wonderful. And so they go in a box every year and come out to be featured during the holiday season. The gold ribbon with the sequin and some beadwork sort of lend an opulent flair, as well as some faux sugared fruit, which always get incorporated into the decoration within this room during the holiday season. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, again, to go back to the whole idea of using artificial things, I think when used judiciously and very thoughtfully, that they can be sublime.
Well, it's really beautiful. So while you've inspired us with all of these great parties and place settings, I'd love for you to walk us through the location for your red wine session. So for people who are interested in learning about things that we've seen here, from flower arranging to cooking, share with us a little bit about the space. I know here we're looking at a beautiful late summer moment, but your gardens are really used year round. So what do you have in store for January and February?
Well, for those of us that live here in the South, you know that the weather, particularly in the winter, can be somewhat unpredictable. I've even had dinner parties outdoor in the entertaining pavilion in mid-January, where without heat, it's been quite comfortable and quite lovely. And so for red wine sessions, as we move into 2021, The first session, which is going to begin somewhere toward the end of January, is going to be sort of a combination of both gardening as well as cooking, in that we will want to talk about putting the garden to bed for the winter. We will talk about planting bulbs and actually do some of that because, you know, here in the South, quite often, we don't get really, really cold sustained until February, end of January and into February. And of course, bulbs need that cold period. And so I plant my bulbs generally beginning about now, all the way through to the 1st of February. So we're going to tackle that a little bit in this first session. And then cooking, we're going to be doing some soups, some stews, some comfort food, and how to entertain using those elements to make people feel warm and cozy during these winter months. So it's going to be a bit all over the place, where we'll do some outdoor work in the garden, as well as some indoor socially distanced work within the kitchen at Red Wine, the outdoor kitchen at Red Wine. Yeah.
And we're currently looking at your teaching kitchen at the pavilion, which you've built out specially for these classes. And just for everyone watching, one of the great takeaways here, besides the food that he's preparing and teaching us to cook, is this beautiful antique butcher block, which my grandparents had one very similar. How you've put it on casters, which is just sort of a simple
Yes.
but genius idea. So tell us a little bit about the creation of this space.
Well, absolutely. Again, when we started up the classes again after the shutdown, the ladies said to me, "You really need to teach a cooking class." And so I asked during that class, with a show of hands, if I did offer one, how many would come? And they all raised their hands. And so I looked at my assistant and said, I think we're going to build a kitchen. We had already advertised the next session, which was 5 weeks away. And so I knew that here during COVID, that I was going to need to build a kitchen, outfit it, and decorate it all in 5 weeks. And this actually occurred 100% in 5 weeks. Again, having been in the event industry for 30 years, I've been a collector actually since I was 14. And so there was no shortage of things to pull from the barn, from closets, from boxes that had not been touched in years. And they have found their pride of place now in the Red Wine kitchen. And so through those double doors that you see, those barn doors there, is the back of the house, where we've got the convection oven, the big refrigeration, stainless steel work tables, the more utilitarian aspects of the kitchen. But I always knew that I wanted to create a space that one would view from the dining space of the pavilion that was easily filmable, would read beautifully on social media, and would also give myself an opportunity to entertain on a smaller scale out of doors. And so again, this kitchen is outside in a barn.
And again, a great mix of the high and low, your vintage and antique French china, and then here on other side of the kitchen, this great display of beautiful blue-green bell jars. It's all about the mix, right?
Absolutely. And, and it's not that they're just there for display. Of course, I use them. It's whether I'm using them for floral arrangements, or I'm using them to actually put up some pickles, or make my heirloom tomato marmalades. These things get used.
That's great. Well, before we run out of time, I want you to tell us a little bit about this outdoor space, and then we're going to move into Q&A.
Sure. So the image there on the left is a relatively new area here in the gardens at Redwine. This image is taken from the center of the path in what we call the hot garden. Prior to 2.5 years ago, all of the floral color in the gardens here at Redwine were were pinks, whites, purples, lavenders, and shades of green. And there really was no hot color at all. And it took a trip to the UK and visiting some of the most spectacular gardens I've ever seen in my life to come to realize how dynamic and powerful the colors of red, orange, and shades in between could be used to great effect. And so this is taken in the hot garden, and we call that structure there at the top the Folly in the hot garden. Again, foraged materials. The walls are made from old cedar lattice work that came out of a garden somewhere south of here. They act as the walls in this 8-sided structure. And then the roof itself is constructed from antique tin roofing shingles, which have been allowed to rust, but again, very thoughtfully used in this image.
It's beautiful, and a beautiful place for respite on the right with those beautiful Suzani pillows. So we already have questions. This one is design related. For clients or customers who are afraid to invest in antiques, how do you, and even maybe for your own home, how do you get them to understand the value of a one-of-a-kind piece to bring into one's home? And I know you primarily concentrate on the outdoors, but I'm sure you work with vintage and antique garden ornamentation there as well.
Absolutely. And even if we're talking about furniture, textiles, all of those things, I think that for those that are viewing, as well as you, Clint, that have visited my home, you understand that I like to collect things that have soul. And I think that if one is dealing with a client that doesn't understand that aspect of incorporating something that has a history into their everyday living, that it is bringing that soul, to me, into a space that allows that space to tell a story. And so I think that whether it's textiles, it's a piece of furniture, it's china, or it's a family heirloom, when you bring something that has some patina to it, it really allows that space to have a story.
That's great. We have another question. Do you use poinsettias? If so, which color and why?
I do. I have used poinsettias. I think that poinsettias are beautiful, but I use them sparingly because they can be so dynamic. And over the years, they have developed lots of different ways to make poinsettias really, really small. And I think that we've even seen sometimes at the grocery store where there's a tiny little pot with a single stem and a single flower. And those can be used on a tabletop, whether in an architectural way, in a line, or something like that, to create a very simple and easy table centerpiece. The larger poinsettias, which one can pick up just about anywhere, if I'm going to use them, I may use several of them together, clustered in a larger basket or a foot basin or something like that to make a dynamic statement. What color? Always red.
Red, perfect, a classic. Someone's asking, what type of garden sculptures have you used? And I know visiting there, you have beautiful antique benches, you have a granite obelisk, which I think is featured in the Atlanta Homes December issue. You're not afraid of also bringing things from the inside outdoors too.
Absolutely. And you're right, Clint. There are a number of antique garden ornaments scattered throughout the property here. And I think that it's more about choosing the appropriate thing for the appropriate place. You know, I've got a couple of faux bois pieces that I really, really love that have a spot here in the garden. One is an antique piece that came from the UK, and the other is a piece from Curry and Company, which is really exuberant, really large, and has a pride of place in the hot garden. And I think that once again, mixing is what can create a really dynamic look and feel. You know, building a simple plinth out of some old bricks. You don't have to use mortar. You stack them in such a way, get a concrete paver from your local box store, put it on top of that, and you've got a nice seat for a garden urn to land. So it doesn't always have to be complicated, nor does it always have to be expensive.
One last question. Have you decided on your own holiday entertaining plans yet, or are you still figuring those out?
Well, for the last 25 years, I have hosted a big Christmas Day dinner for my family and friends, and they have become more and more special as I've gotten older. And last year, we were able to celebrate in that way in the outdoor pavilion because it is about 52 guests. But this year, because of the of what's going on in our world right now, I think my husband and I are going to really, really rein it in. And we might actually even go to the house at the beach and just disappear.
That's great.
And just, we might even just get Chinese food and watch a movie.
That sounds like a perfect plan. So for everyone watching in the chat, you can see a link to download a complimentary issue to the December 2020 issue, which links to the story that I was able to write about red wine sessions, which was a real treat. And also, just to make sure that you can keep up with Keith and everything that's happening with the red wine sessions, you can follow him or follow Red Wine Sessions at Red Wine Sessions on Instagram. And that's where you'll find the most up-to-date information and the calendar of events and upcoming workshops. So Keith, thank you, thank you, thank you for today. This was such an inspiration as always. And I very much look forward to when we can gather again soon. And I wish you and everybody here all the best for a safe and healthy and happy holiday.
Thank you so much, Clinton. You as well.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.